I burst through the heavy courthouse doors, still dressed in my blue hospital scrubs, paper shoe covers crinkling loudly against the marble floor like some kind of alarm. I was gasping for air, hairpins slipping loose, my hands still marked from the operating table. I knew I was running behind, but I had no idea my whole future had already been ripped away from me. The security guard shot me a look of pure pity as he pointed down the long hallway toward the courtroom. When I shoved the double doors open, the scene inside knocked the breath straight out of my lungs. There stood Garrett, the man I loved, hand in hand with Alyssa, my closest friend in the entire world. She wore a stunning white gown and clutched the very same pink flowers I had picked for my own wedding. The judge was already shutting his folder. The ceremony was over. Garrett's mother, Beatrice, marched toward me wearing a smug, victorious grin. She hissed that I was too late and told me to disappear. As I spun around to run from the humiliation, a stranger blocked the exit and completely changed the course of that nightmare afternoon. To understand how I ended up standing there in blood-stained scrubs, you need to know who I am. My name is Dr. Jordan Vance, and I'm a pediatric surgeon at a major children's hospital. I spent my younger years buried in study while everyone else went out and lived, because saving young lives was always my calling. My devotion to the hospital consumed my world, even as it wrecked every relationship I ever tried to build. 3 years back, I met Garrett Thorne at a charity gala and was convinced he was nothing like other men. He worked in commercial real estate and never once flinched at my long hours or my paycheck. He introduced me to his colleagues with real pride in his voice, but his controlling mother Beatrice made it painfully clear at our first dinner together that I would never be the obedient housewife she wanted. While Beatrice couldn't stand me, she absolutely worshipped my best friend Alyssa Brooks. Alyssa and I had been inseparable since college, sharing every heartbreak and every triumph together. She was gorgeous, magnetic, and always conveniently around whenever I pulled an exhausting night shift. I missed every warning sign. The way her hand lingered on Garrett's arm, the constant texts he sent her while I was at work. Garrett popped the question on a quiet winter night in our kitchen, and I said yes through happy tears. We planned a simple courthouse wedding for October, just close family and a few friends. Alyssa was my maid of honor, helping me pick my dress and organize every detail. I truly thought she was my devoted protector, never once suspecting she was quietly plotting to take over the life I was building. Everything fell apart the morning of my wedding when a 6-year-old patient named Lily came in with a burst appendix. Sepsis was spreading fast, and I knew that any delay would cost that little girl her life. I called Garrett to explain the emergency, and he told me just to be there by noon. I figured a 2-hour cushion would be plenty. Mid-surgery, Lily's blood pressure crashed without warning from a second perforation, and we fought to stabilize her, which blew past my original timeline. By the time I finished closing her up, it was almost 1 p.m. I called Garrett over and over, but every call dropped straight to voicemail, so I bolted to my car in a panic. I drove recklessly and pulled up to the courthouse at exactly 2:00, certain I still had time. Instead, my mother met me in the hallway in tears and told me Beatrice had pushed the ceremony up 30 minutes early. Garrett and Alyssa were already married while I was busy saving a child's life. My heart cracked open, but before I could flee, a stranger stepped in front of me. He introduced himself as Detective Arthur Briggs from the Financial Crimes Unit. He had a steady, composed presence and carried a thick folder stuffed with legal paperwork. He explained he'd been trying to reach me at the hospital for days about an ongoing investigation. Beatrice tried to cut in, screaming that I wasn't family anymore. But Detective Briggs brushed her off and asked me to step into the hallway. Out there, he opened the folder and exposed Garrett's hidden financial mess. My new husband, it turned out, had a fraud judgment against him worth more than $200,000. Worse still, he'd secretly teamed up with Alyssa to launch a shell company called Thorne and Brooks Ventures. I stared at the incorporation papers in disbelief as my whole world tilted sideways. Detective Briggs told me Garrett had funneled $87,000 out of our joint account and into that secret venture. Suddenly, I remembered the stack of documents Garrett had rushed me to sign months earlier, insisting it was just condo refinancing. I'd been running on no sleep after a 40-hour shift, and trusted him without question. Every cent of my savings had gone toward funding their secret affair and their secret business. The detective said he was there that day to serve civil subpoenas to both Garrett and Alyssa. A wave of cold, fierce resolve replaced my grief with pure adrenaline. I yanked the shoe covers off my feet, tossed them in a trash can, and straightened my scrub top. I looked at Detective Briggs and asked to walk back into that courtroom to watch it all come crashing down. We walked back in together, and the room dropped into dead silence. Garrett spotted the badge on the detective's belt, and the color drained instantly from his face. Alyssa went rigid with fear as Detective Briggs stepped forward and announced the fraud investigation out loud. He handed Garrett the first subpoena, and my former fiancé's hands shook violently as his carefully built lies came apart. Then he handed the second one to Alyssa, whose face flushed deep red with shame. She dropped it, along with my pink flowers, onto the floor. Forced to crouch down in her wedding dress to gather them, she was met with my Aunt Clara's loud gasp of disbelief from the back row. I looked straight at the two of them and calmly said I hoped it had all been worth it. Then I turned and walked out of that courthouse with my mother and my aunt right behind me. I hired a sharp attorney, Eleanor Finch, who immediately had my name pulled from the compromised accounts. Within 48 hours, we had legally established me as an innocent fraud victim. 7 grueling months of legal battles later, I recovered $61,000 of my stolen savings from their crumbling scheme. The fake business Garrett and Alyssa built collapsed under a wave of investor lawsuits. The strain destroyed their marriage, and they filed for divorce just 6 months after their fraudulent wedding. Months later, Beatrice called to insist she'd known nothing about the money. I told her money wasn't what she owed an apology for, then hung up and never answered again. Lily made a full recovery and went home 11 days after her surgery. Her mother hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe, thanking me endlessly for staying to finish the operation. Standing in that hospital hallway, I understood that saving that little girl was exactly why I existed. Garrett and Alyssa's betrayal had shattered my innocence, but it never touched my purpose or my integrity. I found a beautiful new apartment in a peaceful neighborhood and adopted a dog to keep me company. I stopped believing that a demanding medical career made me unlovable or absent. On the most chaotic morning of my life, my hands did exactly what years of training had prepared them to do. A little girl got to grow up surrounded by her family, and I'll choose that victory over a false marriage every single time.